AITA for packing up my girlfriend's things after she mocked me over her ex? My name is Liam. I'm 29 years old, and I work in IT support at a mid-sized hospital. I live in a rented 2-bedroom apartment just outside of Columbus, and my weeks almost always follow the same rhythm. I start early, go to the gym after work, and then do my grocery shopping on Sundays. My girlfriend's name is Bella. She's 27, and we had been together for a little over a year. She moved in with me 4 months ago, and we shared the bills. Not perfectly split down the middle, but enough to make it feel like a real life built for two. Bella is the kind of person capable of being irresistibly charming for 10 minutes, then turning sharp the second she gets bored. She talks fast, she jokes at the expense of others, and she acts as if the real problem is always the person who reacts. I'm not new to blunt women. I've never needed someone sweet or submissive. But with her, I constantly felt like she was testing how far she could go without consequences. The main issue, the one that kept coming up, was her ex, Mark. They were together for 3 years and broke up shortly before she met me. She swore they got along better as friends. I didn't really like it, but I kept telling myself I could accept an adult friendship as long as it remained respectful. Except it never remained respectful. At first, it was just random coffee meetups. Then it turned into entire evenings. She would mention it like an insignificant detail while doing her makeup, as if she were simply announcing she was going downstairs to check the mail. And the moment I asked a question, she would roll her eyes and accuse me of doing my insecure guy routine again. 2 nights ago, she came home late. She smelled like the neighborhood bar, and she dropped her phone on the kitchen island, screen down. I asked her how her evening went. She replied that it was nice. Mark was in a better mood than usual. That sentence rubbed me the wrong way. It sounded like she was talking about her boyfriend, not her ex. I told her I wasn't comfortable with her spending so much time alone with him, especially at night, especially over drinks. I clarified that I wasn't trying to control her. I was simply asking for reasonable boundaries consistent with a serious relationship. She leaned against the doorframe as if I were a coworker who had just told a bad joke. Then she said it was almost endearing the way I got jealous when she saw her ex. Next, she added that maybe I just didn't have what it takes to be a boyfriend. I didn't argue with her. I stayed quiet because at that exact moment, something just clicked. When she said that, I didn't feel anger. I felt an ending. Not the end of the conversation, but the end of the equation I had been trying to solve for months. Up until then, I had approached this situation like a problem that could be fixed with better communication. I had asked for clearer plans. I had suggested group outings instead of one-on-one drinks. I had even offered to meet Mark so he would stop being this blurry, invasive presence hovering over my relationship. But every suggestion was met as if I were submitting a permission slip for the right to exist in my own apartment. Her remark about not being a real boyfriend wasn't just an insult. It was a way of positioning herself. She was turning my discomfort into my weakness while settling herself into the role of the one who judges, who evaluates, who decides my worth. I am not going to compete to have my own relationship. She went to take a shower, still wearing that little satisfied smile, as if she had scored a point. As for me, I cleaned up the kitchen in silence, and while I was cleaning, I replayed the last 4 months in my head since she moved in. All those times she came home late without warning. All those times she said Mark knew her better than anyone even though I was right there in front of her. All those comparisons between how he handled things and how I handled them. And I knew one thing very well. If the roles had been reversed, if I were the one spending entire evenings every week drinking alone with my ex, only to tell Bella afterward that she was cute for feeling uncomfortable, it would have blown up immediately. There would have been a scene, a list of conditions, demands, and accusations. But when I asked for a bare minimum of respect, I was instantly reduced to the role of the insecure guy. I went to bed before she got out of the bathroom. I didn't start any arguments. I didn't snoop through her phone. I didn't make any theatrical threats. I simply lay in the dark doing the math. The lease is in my name. The bills are in my name. Every month, she transferred her share of the rent to me. But aside from some shared furniture and the fact that a portion of her mail arrived here, there was no real legal tie between us. By midnight, I had already made my decision. Not because I was jealous, but because I refused to stay in a place where I was openly ranked beneath another man, only to be mocked for noticing the hierarchy. The next morning, I got up at 5 a.m. as usual. She was still sleeping. I made some coffee, opened my laptop, and put in a request for half a day off from work. Then, I started taking boxes out of the storage closet. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't move in a dramatic way. I treated it like a quiet weekend chore. The first thing I packed was the easiest. Her shoes by the entryway, the extra makeup trays that had ended up taking over half the bathroom counter, the stack of mail in her name that I had meant to give her for several days. I labeled each box neatly with a black marker so there would be no confusion later. Around 7 a.m., she walked into the kitchen wearing one of my old college t-shirts. She saw the boxes and frowned as if I had rearranged the furniture without asking her opinion. She asked me what I was doing. I told her I was organizing, which was technically true. She poured herself some coffee, started scrolling on her phone, and then said she might go see Mark later because he was having a bad week. She said it with complete casualness, as if our conversation about boundaries barely 12 hours earlier had never existed. At that point, everything permanently locked into place inside me. I simply replied okay and kept packing. By 9 a.m., half of her closet was already gone. I folded her clothes properly. I didn't throw anything away. I did everything neatly, methodically, because I refused to let this situation be turned into a narrative where I became unstable, uncontrollable, or dramatic. This wasn't revenge, it was logistics. She fully realized what was happening when I unplugged her desk lamp to wrap up the cord. She asked if I was serious. I said yes. She laughed again, but this time her laugh was thinner, drier, more fragile. She asked if I was really breaking up with her over an insecurity issue. I told her I was ending the relationship because I don't date people who disregard my boundaries and then mock me simply for having them. She crossed her arms and threw back at me that I was proving her exact point, that I didn't have what it takes to be a real boyfriend, because mature men trust their partners. I replied that mature partners don't turn trust into an endurance test for their own entertainment. A silence fell then. A real silence. For the first time since I had known her, she had no immediate comeback. She asked where she was supposed to go. I reminded her that Mark lived 10 minutes away. She looked at me as if I had just said something outrageous. I wasn't joking. I told her I wasn't putting her out on the street. I reminded her she had several options. Her parents live an hour away. She has 2 close friends in town. And then there is Mark, of course, the one who seemed stable enough to become her emotional priority several nights a week. She said I was being dramatic and that all couples fight. I replied that yes, couples fight, but that this wasn't a fight. It was a clear pattern where I would express a boundary, and she would immediately reframe that boundary as a character flaw in me. She then changed her approach. Her voice softened. She said I was overreacting, that she didn't really mean what she had said. She claimed she was joking. I asked her to explain the joke to me. She was unable to. I then told her I had no interest in negotiating a discounted version of respect. I also made it clear that since the lease was in my name, I was giving her until the end of the day to collect what she needed. I would carry the boxes to her car if necessary. I wouldn't argue, but she was not staying here. She accused me of threatening her housing. I calmly reminded her that she had lived here for 4 months without being on the lease and that I had no legal obligation to give her indefinite notice. Despite that, I was giving her the entire day because I am not irresponsible. She started pacing around the living room, saying I was choosing my pride over love. I replied that it wasn't a matter of pride, it was a matter of alignment. If she sincerely believed I didn't fit the profile of a boyfriend, then I was simply removing that problem for her. That sentence hit her. Around noon, she started pulling her clothes out of the closet to shove them into a suitcase with far less care than I had taken in preparing her boxes. While doing so, she muttered little acidic remarks under her breath about how she couldn't believe I was so fragile. I didn't reply. I sealed the last box with tape. Then I stacked it near the door. By 3 p.m., her car was loaded. When she stopped in the doorframe, she expected me to hold her back. I didn't do it. I simply stepped aside to let her pass, the door open. She stood there for a few seconds, as if the scene wasn't following the script she had imagined. Usually, when she attacked, I responded. That was our rhythm. A sharp remark from her, a defensive explanation from me, and then a circular discussion that almost always ended with me apologizing for being too sensitive. But this time, there was no debate, only facts, only actions, only a clean break. She asked me if this was really it. I replied yes. She said I was really going to let an entire year end like this. I corrected her. I told her that it had ended the exact moment she decided my discomfort was something amusing. That response irritated her more than if I had yelled. She said that Mark never tried to control her. I replied that if spending repeated evenings drinking alone with an ex while living with a partner required absolutely no adjustment according to her, then we simply didn't have the same definition of control and respect. She shook her head and repeated that I was insecure. I told her that was possible, but you don't cure insecurity with humiliation. She tried one last approach. She asked if we couldn't just take a few days to let the tension settle down. I answered no. Letting things cool off implies there is still some ambiguity. I was no longer in the ambiguous phase. She loaded the last box into her trunk and shut it harder than necessary. I stayed on the sidewalk, my hands in my pockets, without blocking her path, without running after her. Before getting into her car, she told me I would regret this decision. She added that most women would never accept jealousy like mine. I replied that I wasn't looking for most women. I was looking for a single woman who wouldn't compare me to her ex in my own kitchen. Those were my final words. She left without adding anything. I went back upstairs, locked the door, and the first thing I did was change the Wi-Fi password. Then, I changed the login credentials for the streaming platforms. Not out of revenge, but for clarity. After that, I sat down in an apartment that had suddenly become much quieter. I expected to feel something violent, anger, sadness, or panic. But what dominated above all was relief. About 20 minutes after she left, she sent me a text message. The beginning was predictable. "Are you serious right now?" Then came entire paragraphs about how I had blindsided her, how normal couples get through these kinds of things together, how I was cold, mechanical, and transactional. She said I had humiliated her by suggesting she go to Mark's place. I read it all once. I didn't respond. An hour later, she tried to call me. I let it ring, then another call, then a voicemail notification. I listened to it solely to check if there was anything practical to sort out. But there was nothing practical in it. She was crying, yes, but not in a broken way. Rather in an annoyed, frustrated, almost offended way. She kept saying I was punishing her for having friends. She claimed I would eventually calm down and realize I had overreacted. It was at that moment I understood she still thought all of this was temporary. However, I have no desire to be the lesson a person thinks they can reverse later once the shock wears off. I sent her one last message. I kept it short. I told her, I do not want any more contact. Please arrange the pickup of your few remaining items solely by email. Then I blocked her number. Not in a grand dramatic gesture, not after a speech, just blocked. I also blocked her on Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat. I removed her from our shared photo album. I disconnected her devices from my streaming accounts. I didn't post anything vague, hurt, or theatrical. In less than 10 minutes, she tried calling me from another number. I blocked that one too. Some people might say I should have left a communication channel open to stay mature. The answer is simple. Every previous disagreement had ended in a performance, a sparring match, a stage production where she tried to win. I wasn't going to participate in another round. Blocking her wasn't a reaction out of anger. It was a necessary step. I know how she operates. As soon as she senses a crack, she pushes until she turns it into a door. Except there was no door. By evening, the apartment's atmosphere had changed. Not empty, stable. And around 9 p.m., there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Mark was standing there, exactly as I had imagined him. Casual hoodie, hands in his pockets, expression suspended somewhere between feigned concern and quiet satisfaction. He introduced himself as if we hadn't already been orbiting each other for a year through Bella's stories and incessant comparisons. He said that Bella was at his place and that she was upset. He added that she had told him I completely overreacted and made her leave for nothing. I replied that I don't discuss my relationship with third parties. He smiled in a way that suggested he thought he had some sort of handle on the situation. He said he just wanted to make sure everything was okay and that there were no misunderstandings. He also pointed out that they had always managed to stay close and that it was never meant to threaten me. That phrasing struck me. Never meant to threaten me. Interesting. I answered that whether I felt threatened or not was entirely irrelevant. What mattered was that the situation had crossed a boundary I had clearly expressed. He shrugged, saying that some guys just can't handle their girlfriend having a past. At that moment, it was clear he hadn't come to smooth anything over. He was there to test the waters. He wanted to see if I was going to fold, apologize, or demand explanations. I did none of those things. I told him she was no longer my girlfriend. I told him I didn't want any more visits to my home. If she needed something, she could write to me herself, not go through him. He asked me if I was really willing to throw a whole year away because of jealousy. I replied, I am entirely willing to end a relationship in which my discomfort is ridiculed and then defended by the very man who causes it. At that, he smiled a lot less. I stood there the whole time with the door only half open. Never fully. I didn't invite him in. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't debate. And when the conversation stopped moving forward, I ended it. I told him, this is not your problem to fix. Good night. Then I closed the door and locked it. 5 minutes later, an email notification popped up. The message was from Bella. The subject line contained only one word. Seriously. The content itself was longer than all the texts she had sent me that day. She said I had humiliated her in front of Mark by refusing to talk to him. She wrote that he was only trying to help and that I had made the situation awkward. She repeated that I had overreacted and that normal adults don't pack someone's belongings into boxes overnight without a discussion. I read it carefully because an email always feels a bit more deliberate than a text, and there was not a single apology in it. No acknowledgement of the specific sentence she had thrown at me. Nothing about telling me I didn't have what it takes to be a boyfriend. Nothing about the laugh she had let out when I explained my discomfort to her. The entire tone of the message revolved around one single thing: how my reaction had affected her. She added that she no longer even knew if she wanted to be with someone so rigid. She said I seemed cold, calculating, and that every relationship requires a minimum amount of flexibility. I gave her a point there. Yes, a relationship requires flexibility, but certainly not a flexibility exercised at the expense of the most basic respect. I replied to her only once. I wrote, I do not wish to reopen the same discussion around the same boundary. I added, I clearly told you that you going out regularly, alone, late at night to drink with your ex made me uncomfortable. Then you brushed off that concern by presenting it as a flaw in my character. That is not a minor incompatibility, it is contempt. I also made a point to clarify something important. I had not made her leave in a fit of impulsivity. I had put an end to the relationship and then asked her to leave an apartment that legally belonged to me alone. That is not the same thing. I explained to her that I would set a time during the week for her to pick up the 2 small items she had forgotten. After that, there would be no more contact. I kept a structured tone. No insults, no sarcasm. She responded within minutes, saying I was twisting everything and that I was insecure long before this incident. I didn't reply. I simply archived the exchange. Then I created a filter so that her emails would be automatically sent to a folder I would no longer see unless I chose to open it myself. I wasn't going to debate my own standards with someone who treated them like a personality defect. But what bothered me the most was not her email. It was what a friend told me the next morning. The next day, I went to the gym as usual. Routine keeps me stable. As I was finishing a set, my friend Leo approached with a strange expression, halfway between awkwardness and curiosity. He asked if Bella and I were doing okay. I told him we had broken up. He nodded slowly and said that made sense. Then he hesitated. I asked him what he meant. He told me he had run into Bella and Mark at a bar a few weeks earlier. Not our usual neighborhood bar. Another one on the other side of town. He thought I knew about it. He said they didn't look like 2 people who were simply catching up. They were sitting close to each other. Her hand was resting on Mark's arm. They were laughing in a way that had something intimate about it. He insisted that he had not seen anything explicit, but he also added that if he hadn't known the context, he would have naturally assumed they were together. That didn't shock me. It clarified things. What bothered me was not the possibility that something inappropriate had occurred. It was the narrative she had built around me. She had made me out to be the one inventing imaginary tension, as if my discomfort were purely theoretical. When in reality, she was rebuilding a dynamic right in front of my eyes that looked exactly like a relationship. I thank Leo for telling me. I didn't get angry. I didn't storm out of the gym. I finished my workout. On the drive back, I thought about the whole timeline. The increasing frequency of their outings, the repeated comparisons, the way her face lit up when his name appeared, whereas she seemed instantly bored as soon as I told her about my day. It all fit together. Back at the apartment, I opened the filtered folder of her emails. There were already 3 new messages. The tone had changed, less accusatory, more exploratory. She asked if I was really serious. She said that maybe we had both mishandled the situation. She suggested we meet up to talk like adults. I didn't reply. Instead, I packed up the last 2 items she had left behind, a hairdryer and a framed photo of the 2 of us taken the previous summer. I then scheduled a pickup time for Saturday afternoon in a single-sentence email. No discussion, no meeting, no nostalgia. And that is when she tried one last move. Saturday arrived quickly. That very morning, she sent an email asking if we could talk when she came to get her things. I replied with a single line. The pickup is scheduled for 2 p.m. I will leave the box outside the door. At 1:55 p.m., I placed the box in the hallway, right in front of my apartment, and then locked the door. I had no desire for a negotiation on my doorstep, nor a scene in the hallway. At 2:03 p.m., she sent a text from a new number saying she was there. I didn't answer. A minute later, I heard her footsteps in the hallway. Then she knocked, not violently, with control. She said my name through the door and stated that we should at least end this properly. She added that I was being cold and that after everything we had shared, she deserved at least a real face-to-face conversation. I remained silent. Then she switched to a softer tone. She said she had perhaps misphrased that stuff about jealousy, that she hadn't meant for it to sound that way, that she was just frustrated. That was the closest thing to a form of accountability all week. And even then, it only surfaced the moment she finally realized I was not going back. I opened the door just enough to stand in the frame without inviting her in. She had changed. Less confident, less amused. She said she didn't think I would actually go through with it. She admitted she believed I would eventually calm down and apologize, as usual. That sentence confirmed everything else. I told her calmly that the moment she laughed before questioning my worth as a partner had revealed how she evaluated the men she dated. I told her I wasn't interested in a relationship where I had to compete with an ex or be tested through my reactions. She replied that Mark was just a familiar presence, that it didn't mean anything. I told her that familiarity is not an issue at all. Disrespect is. She asked if there was really no chance left. I answered no. Not because I hated her, not because I was trying to win anything, but because the moment I see contempt, I don't try to negotiate it until it vaguely resembles tolerance. She picked up the box. No hug, no dramatic goodbye, just a long look as if she were recalculating a situation she thought she had controlled from the start. Then she walked away. I locked the door for the last time and permanently deleted her contact information from my phone. It has been 3 weeks now. No texts, no visits, no drama. And for the first time in months, my apartment finally feels like it belongs to me. Instead of being this strange stage where I constantly felt observed, evaluated, and compared. If that's what it means to not have what it takes to be a boyfriend, then I'm perfectly fine with that. Comment. I believe one of the most important lessons we can learn is that setting a boundary is an act of self-care, not an attack. True respect is not about never having conflict. It is about how someone responds when you express your feelings. Sometimes the most powerful move is not a loud argument, but a quiet, determined decision. You are never responsible for how others react to your reasonable limits. Remember that kindness to others should never come at the cost of being unkind to yourself. Choosing peace over a toxic connection is not giving up. It is an act of profound self-respect. Healing truly begins when you stop trying to earn the consideration that should be given freely. I believe we all deserve relationships in which our comfort and feelings are treated as valid, not as an inconvenience. You are the primary guardian of your own well-being. I hope this reminds you to always choose the path that leads back to your own inner stability. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.